Hi everyone, and welcome to Exploring the Build. If you just found this place, then welcome. I'm Alex, and this is my channel where we theorycraft and explore different character builds for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Today we are continuing the Gloomhaven series of character builds. We are trying to take the character classes from the hit board game Gloomhaven and recreate them in Dungeons & Dragons. For those who know Gloomhaven, we're going to be recreating each of the character classes from Gloomhaven itself, the Forgotten Circles expansion, Jaws of the Lion, and Frosthaven. For any of the locked character classes, I'll be sure to add plenty of spoiler tags so that nothing is given away about any of the classes that aren't already considered public knowledge. Additionally, I'm not recreating each card the class has in particular, but rather looking at the character class main mechanics, their character art, and the overall theme for inspiration when looking at D&D mechanics to use to recreate them. For those who know D&D, since these builds are mainly theory crafting and just for fun, there are times when I'll be using Unearthed Arcana within the builds. Unearthed Arcana is unofficial material, so it may or may not be okay depending on the DM. And if you actually like the idea of using some of these builds in your own game and wanted to get around the unofficial material, I will be sure to add some replacement suggestions when needed. Today, we are finishing up the starting character classes from Gloomhaven by making the Cragheart in D&D. Overall, the Cragheart is the Earth Generator. That may seem a little reductive, but it isn't exactly wrong. No class generates or uses Earth as well as the Cragheart does. When looking at D&D, we're going to want to create a build that has a full mastery over the element of Earth. In addition to being the Earth class, there are also a few other things that the Cragheart can do that we'll want to pick up. First and foremost, they can both create and destroy obstacles. The Cragheart is one of the few classes within the Gloomhaven series that can interact with the environment of the scenario and actually gain a boost from it. This will probably be the trickiest part to emulate in D&D, as there aren't a whole lot of create obstacle or destroy obstacle abilities beyond simple spell casting that can either create difficult terrain or perhaps make some sort of obstacle. A quick other note for the Cragheart, they're very versatile in terms of their build. You could build them for melee or range. You can build them for damage or support. This just means that we're going to need to do a little bit of everything when we're creating the Cragheart. Now before we jump into the actual build, let's look at their flavor text. The Savas Cragheart. The Savas value power above all else. This severe and exclusionary race has rocky, uneven skin except for their chests, which appear as a smooth, transparent glass. Beneath the surface of that glass is the manifestation of their power. Energy cores fashioned from the elements they have mastered: ice, fire, air, and earth. Before a Savas masters at least one of these elements and obtains its power as their own, they are considered to be nothing. Thus, from an early age, Savas children study feverishly to gain mastery over a single element, typically spending 20 years of devoted effort to do so. Some Savas have been known to live among other races, using their elemental mastery in one form or another, but this is largely frowned upon by the majority of Savas as a base and primitive way to live. There are many Savas who never attain their mastery of an element, and are exiled from the society, having no choice but to live among the other races or in solitude. Before a Cragheart is exiled, however, they earn their name by having their chest cavity marred and shattered, forever reminding them of their inadequacy. But Craghearts are not without their strength. Even with no control or mastery, they still have an affinity for their native Earth and can display great feats of strength with their rocky stature. Starting in character creation with our lineage, we are a Savas. A Savas is a sentient rock person, but they're not exactly an elemental in their own right. Since we are a wholly unique breed of creature, we're going to use custom lineage for this build. It's a shocker, I know. With custom lineage, we are going to gain either dark vision or a skill. I'm going to take dark vision for this one, since again, we usually don't need the extra skill, but you can choose whichever one you want. For the custom lineage feat, we have an interesting dilemma. There are a couple of feats that would be really good to take, but doing so is going to mean that we actually miss out on improving our ability scores. And unfortunately, that's going to be a theme for most of our ASI/feat levels in the future as well. So keeping in mind that we're going to be fighting between feats and ASIs, the first feat we're going to take is Crusher. Crusher is a half feat, which means it's going to give us a +1 to an ability score of our choice, but the choice has to be between Strength or Constitution. Crusher is also going to get us some powerful passive effects as well, one being a powerful on-crit passive that just says that if we crit an enemy, all of our allies have advantage on attacks against that enemy until the start of our next turn, which is a very nice buff. But there's also the main passive benefit that we really took the feat for, and that is push. Once per turn, when we hit an enemy with an attack that deals bludgeoning damage, we can push that creature 5 feet. The Cragheart has a lot of access to push in their kit, and a lot of early access to it as well. Different in some ways than the other character classes, such as the Mind Thief might be able to move or push an enemy. The Cragheart is going to be wanting to push enemies specifically to interact with their environment around them. Now, we'll worry about being able to interact with the environment later, but right away, we definitely need some sort of push, and this is a perfect way to get that little bit of Gloomhaven push right off the bat. For our stats, we're going to take the +2 from Custom Lineage and put that into Strength. Then we'll take the +1 from Crusher and put it into Con, to give us a bit more of a balanced set of ability scores. With these two in mind, and taking point buy as usual, we should hopefully wind up with the following ability scores: 16 Strength, 8 Dexterity, 16 Constitution, 8 Intelligence, 12 Wisdom, and 14 Charisma. For our background, we are an outcast from our society, so while it doesn't really matter too much what we take, we're probably going to want something along the lines of Hermit or Outlander. If there are any others that work, then feel free to take those as well. Just make sure we flavor up the idea of us being exiled from our homeland and now in a wholly unique and, to us, alien world. Starting out the actual level breakdown of the build, we are going to begin with Fighter. As much as I would like to start off with something that gives us control of Earth, we are going to keep things overly simple at level 1 and just start as a martial class. Fighter is going to give us Second Wind, which, as usual, is a little bonus action heal that gives us 1d10 plus our fighter level of hit points back, and it comes back on a short rest, so it's a really nice bit of bonus healing to have. We also gain a fighting style of our choice. Now, there are a couple of good options we could take, but I'm going to pick Unarmed Fighting. The Cragheart is all about punching, and the unarmed fighting style is what will give us a lot of punching to do without a heavy investment into Monk. Obviously, in the Gloomhaven board game, you can actually pick up weapons like hammers or swords or spears or anything else that you could use, and feel free to do so as a Cragheart. To make use of Crusher, I would definitely recommend any weapon that deals bludgeoning damage, or because a lot of the names of the cards suggest that we're just punching enemies, I'm going to try and stick with the unarmed fighting style for as much as possible for this build. Since our unarmed strikes will deal bludgeoning damage as well, this is our main source of push, for a little while at least. We'll get some better options later, but we take what we can for right now. At level 2, we are immediately switching classes in order to pick up that crucial control of Earth. So here's where I'm going to have to take a quick moment to talk about what we're doing and why. Now, you may have noticed we left our Charisma at 14, while our other stats suffered a little bit, and there's a reason for that. The absolute best class/subclass that is going to get us control over Earth and make us feel like the Cragheart is going to be the Stone Sorcerer. The drawback to this is that the Stone Sorcerer, or Stone Sorcery, is Unearthed Arcana, and an old one at that. Now, if this isn't going to work for you, then actually there isn't much I would really feel comfortable recommending to get the same effect. Druid would be okay, since it is a class focused on the theme of nature, but with a large focus on animals and wild shapes rather than on the actual nature of Earth itself. Warlock has the Tao Genie, but we don't really serve a patron, so I'm not sure if that would be a good pick either. Cleric could work as well, as it'll make you more tanky and give you some more healing, but again, we don't have a specific god or pantheon that gives us our powers, rather our powers more come from us. This really makes me feel that the Sorcerer is the right choice, but unfortunately Stone Sorcery is the only real right choice for that control of Earth. I'm going to continue with Stone Sorcery for this build, and I think that for this build in particular, I'm actually going to recommend that you try to do your best to use it if you wanted to use the Cragheart in your own game. Anything else that is official material is just not going to get the same effect that we want to get as the Stone Sorcery Unearthed Arcana subclass. With that out of the way, we're going to continue our actual build. Stone Sorcery is going to give us a couple nice bonuses right off the bat. First up, we gain bonus proficiencies. These are useless for us since we started Fighter, but if you did start with Sorcerer first instead of Fighter, which is an option, they're actually pretty great. We also gain Stone's Durability. This gives us an extra 1 health right away, and every time we level up, we'll gain another 1 HP on top of our usual HP. We also get a natural AC of 13 plus our Constitution modifier. And this is probably one of, if not the best natural AC effects that there are in 5e, and it's a shame that it's stuck behind Unearthed Arcana. We can still gain the natural AC even if we have a shield, so that means it's time to drop whatever armor we actually had, but keep our shield. So notice that already all these effects from Stone Sorcery are really devoted to making us a tanky frontline character. Sorcerer notably has a d6 hit die, so there's not much we can do about that, but a lot of these effects are going to mitigate that restrictive hit die and still make us feel like a tanky frontliner, like the way the Cragheart is maybe not meant to be played, but certainly can be played. For our actual spell casting, we also gain access to Metal Magic. Metal Magic gives us a couple extra spells to choose from when we're picking our known spells. Speaking of our known spells, in terms of what spells we pick each level, I'm actually going to put a bit of a restriction on us in order to really capture the Control of Earth theme. Basically, we're just going to try not to take any spells unless they are or can be flavored as Earth-based spells. This restriction should help keep us grounded, pun intended, to our Cragheart theme when looking at all the various spells that we can choose from. Since we only get 2 spells at level 1, I'm going to choose Catapult, which means we could essentially throw a rock, which is really good since the Cragheart loves to throw rocks, and then also Earth Tremor. Finally, for cantrips, I'm going to be a little mean this time and say that we're only taking from this list: Gust, Mold Earth, Thunderclap, Mending, Message, and Light. Whenever you gain a cantrip, refer to that list as they are the main ones that can easily be flavored as Earth-based magic. Obviously, you don't have to play by these restrictions, but I think they'll really make us thematically feel like the Cragheart, even if they're not mechanically the most powerful options we could choose from. On level 3, we're going to go to Sorcerer 2. Sorcerer 2 is going to get us another spell and Font of Magic, which is our first access to sorcery points. Sorcery points will eventually let us use meta magic to add some cool effects to our spells, but for now they can only be used to get spell slots back. For the spell we're going to get at Sorcerer 2, I'm going to recommend Thunderous Smite from our Metal Magic feature, though notably we can also pick Color Spray and theme it more like sand instead of colors, which would give us a bit of a muddle type effect and feel like our Dirt Tornado card, or Thunder Wave, which would also be something useful. Thunderous Smite, however, is going to help us in terms of our actual melee potential when it comes to walking up and punching an enemy, so we'll go with that for right now. At level 4, we're going to jump back to Fighter 2. We don't want to be too far behind when it comes to extra attack, so we have to make sure we do our best to keep up. At Fighter 2, we're going to gain Action Surge, and while punching twice is a pretty nice effect, an even nicer one is being able to cast 2 leveled spells in a single turn, which we could now do with Action Surge. At level 5, we're going to go back to Fighter 3, and Fighter 3 gets us our subclass, and here we have an interesting but relatively easy choice. The Cragheart could kind of fit into a number of different fighter subclasses, with Champion for simplicity, Cavalier for tanking, or Eldritch Knight for more spells, etc. But we're going to go with Battlemaster. Battlemaster is going to let us gain access to Student of War, which is just a little flavored feature that mainly gives us proficiency in artisans' tools of our choice, though we could pick Stonecarver's tools, which would really make us a stoneworking and earth-controlling build for sure, but in reality, it doesn't really matter too much what we pick here. There's also more important benefits, like the Battlemaster maneuvers and the superiority die that we get. We're going to get 3 maneuvers we can use, and 4 superiority die to use them with. The main maneuvers we really want are Pushing Attack, Sweeping Attack, and Trip Attack. For the Gloomhaven translation, our Pushing Attack equals a big push, our Sweeping Attack is our AoE melee attacks, and Trip is a poor person's immobilize. We could also take Disarming Attack, notably, but Disarm doesn't work as well in D&D as it does in Gloomhaven, and it would require us to fight an enemy that actually has a weapon in their hand that we could disarm instead of just canceling their attack outright. Beyond these 3 first Battlemaster maneuvers, though, it isn't really going to matter what we take, so I'll just be saying pick your favorites from here on out. A bit of a side note as well. Now, I'm not sure if this will stack, and I'm guessing most people would say it doesn't, but in Gloomhaven it would, and I think it's pretty fun, so I would argue that it actually should. And what I'm talking about is, if we were to cast our Thunderous Smite spell on ourselves, which gives a little bit of extra damage, the enemy has to make a strength save, and then they get pushed if they fail that save, and we were to actually punch an enemy with that spell up, and then spend a superiority die to do pushing attack on top of that, that enemy would have to make 2 separate strength saves, and after hopefully failing both, be pushed up to a total of 30 feet away from us from Thunderous Smite, the Crusher feat, and the superiority die to do pushing attack. This is absolutely insane in terms of controlled movement, where we can just send an enemy roughly across the battlefield, depending on how big the actual battlefield that we're playing on is. At level 6, we are a Fighter 4, and here we are taking a level to get something that we probably don't need, but we're going to take anyway, and that is Magic Initiate. So we get an ASI/feat, and we're going to take a feat that we actually technically don't need, but thematically is nice to have. Now, when I started this build, I had to start Fighter and dip Sorcerer to gain control over Earth. And this is a very melee-oriented way to play, like I've sort of alluded to already, and full disclosure, I'm a bit biased towards the melee version, since that's how I played Cragheart in Gloomhaven. However, if you prefer to switch any of these levels around, you could still end up feeling like a Cragheart and actually probably focus more on range instead of melee, or even support instead of melee, rather than what we're doing. It's perfectly fine however you do it, but the reason we're taking Magic Initiate here is because we want to actually pick up some ranged options. We're going to get to pick 2 cantrips from any full caster list plus Warlock, and we also get to pick 1 spell from that list as well. We can cast that spell once per day for free, which is a nice bonus, and we use whatever spellcasting ability is associated with the class list we picked from for the spells from this feat. Since we're a sorcerer, we're going to want to get something that uses Charisma, which in this case is going to be Warlock. And why Warlock instead of something else like Bard, perhaps? Well, for that, I'd say Warlock gives us access to Magic Stone. Magic Stone is a semi-niche cantrip, but for us it makes perfect sense. Going Warlock avoided us having to use our Wisdom from Druid in order to get it. This cantrip is the only one that really feels thematically appropriate for us to have an actual on-demand ranged attack. Instead of just using Catapult, we can just pick up some stones, cast Magic Stone, and then throw them as our ranged weapons and actually deal some pretty reliable damage. Especially since that scales with extra attack, which is what we're going to want to pick up from Fighter eventually anyways. For our other cantrip, the only one that also feels thematically appropriate would be Blade Ward, which that's actually a bit of a lie. We could double down on range if we really wanted to and pick up Eldritch Blast. Eldritch Blast can then be upgraded to have push or immobilize or even pull effects, but we would then have to take a feat to make up for Eldritch Blast, which is Eldritch Adept, or if we don't want to take that feat, we would then have to actually put an investment into Warlock in order to grab levels to get invocations, to get those upgrades. But that would make us a bit of a more absurd character, and it's all just a whole lot to do for a build that we're not even focused on right now. Ranged builds and Eldritch Blast, I don't know what we're talking about. Here we're focused only on melee build Craghearts. As far as spells go, the one that we would like to cast once per day for free is probably Armor of Agathis, or Agathis, depending on how you pronounce it. Since we're a melee build, we would get a lot of mileage out of the temporary hit points and the retaliate damage. I'm not a huge fan of it being cold damage for our build, but, well, even a mountain has a peak, right? So we can kind of thematically make it work with our theme. Of course, if we were a ranged build, we could take a different spell, but this one would still come in kind of handy for a ranged build too from time to time. So all in all, we go with Magic Stone, Blade Ward, and Armor of Agathis. If we're a ranged build, we still take those, even though we could probably take a little bit more time to look at our different options and pick something a little more useful. Level 7 gets us to Fighter 5, and it took us a long time to get here, but we finally made it. We now have extra attack, so we can now punch twice, or like I said last level, throw 2 Magic Stones. Until now, we've really been working overtime with Action Surge and Thunderous Smite to keep up our damage on par with the rest of our party. Or at least that's what I would say if we actually cared about being a viable build and not just creating Earth the way a true Cragheart is meant to do. So we're happy to have extra attack as it will make us scale a little bit better, but really we just want to be able to do more Earth things on our turn than we did before. Level 8 is Fighter 6, and this will cap our fighter levels for a little while at least. We get an additional ASI/feat, and this is about the right time to buff our strength to 18. If we were more ranged, I would say increase Charisma, as that is further behind than we would like, but our melee build is content with just being a really buff rock person. At level 9, we're going to jump back to Sorcerer, and we're now going to gain Meta Magic, another spell and access to level 2 spells. From our Metal Magic, that's going to be Branding Smite and Magic Weapon. Now, if your DM is generous enough to let you cast Magic Weapon on your fist to make it magical, then definitely pick that. If not, though, then I am going to recommend that we actually take Wither and Bloom. Earthen Grasp, Earthbind, or Dust Devil would all be other very thematic options, but if we can flavor Wither and Bloom to be more natural in origin rather than necrotic, which I think we really can, since that's the way it was kind of designed based on its background, then I think this is a great spell for us to use. Namely because the Cragheart literally has a card that does the exact same effect that Wither and Bloom does, where it's an AoE, deals damage, and heals our allies. See Sentient Growth for more details. Now with the meta magic we also get at this level, I'm going to recommend we take either Quicken Spell and Extended Spell or Distant Spell. Pick whichever of those two that you want more, whether you want to double the duration of a spell or double the range. Both are very good meta magic options and will greatly help with our action economy. At level 10, we are a Sorcerer 4 and we get another ASI/Feat. Even though we are a melee build, I'm actually fine with just 18 strength and don't feel the need to cap our strength just yet. If you want to, then be my guest, but we're actually going to up our charisma now by 2. Constitution would also be good to improve, but the way I see it, we have too many AoE spell attacks that we actually kind of want to use, so it would be nice if they'd actually work from time to time. We increase charisma to 16 in the hopes that every now and then one of our AoE spells will actually pay off. Again, if we were going full melee, we could just up strength and focus on casting Thunderous Smite and call it a day, and if we were full range, our charisma would probably be really high too. But since we're trying to mix back and forth, this is the way we're going to have to spread ourselves thin on ability score improvements. At level 11, we're going to be a Sorcerer 5. Sorcerer 5 gives us access to 3rd level spell slots, and while it's certainly tempting to take Fireball or Counterspell, we're going to stick to our theme and our restrictions and grab Erupting Earth. Erupting Earth is an AoE spell that both deals damage and creates difficult terrain. The main reason we want this is because it is the closest we're going to get to creating obstacles like the Cragheart does in Gloomhaven. There really aren't that many spells in D&D that will let us emulate the Cragheart's ability to just spawn an obstacle that can tactically impact the battlefield. However, we can spawn difficult terrain to impact the battlefield, which is almost just as good. At level 12, we are up to Sorcerer 6, and this time we are going to pick up Melf's Minute Meteors. Yes, it deals fire damage, but we still count it as a rock-themed spell since they are meteors that we create. And then we're also going to get our next Stone Sorcerer ability here, which is Stone Aegis. Stone Aegis allows us to grant a Protective Aegis to one ally within 60 feet of us. The Protective Aegis gives damage reduction to piercing, slashing, and bludgeoning damage equal to 2 plus our Sorcerer level divided by 4. I don't know if that rounds up or down, but I don't think it matters too much. It's just a lot of math, and it's not going to equal a very large number. Also, when that ally has the Aegis and gets attacked, we can use our reaction to teleport over and make a melee attack of our own against the attacker. This melee attack then does some additional force damage. The Stone Aegis is reminiscent of the shield ability in Gloomhaven, which is nice, but the teleport and attack isn't really similar to anything that the Cragheart is capable of. We'll take it anyways though, since it's a nice ability and we want to keep going up Sorcerer. Also, I'm 90% sure we can use the Aegis on ourselves too. That just means that the teleport effect might not work the way we want it to, but if we can't, that's perfectly fine. If we can, then we can give ourselves some shield, which is always nice to have. At level 13, we are a Sorcerer 7. All we really get at Sorcerer 7 is access to 4th level spells. And now I would personally take Stone Skin, as it can make us a little tankier in some situations. And if we pair it with our Aegis, then we can make ourselves very tanky when it comes to non-magical piercing, slashing, and bludgeoning damage. However, if you'd rather save your concentration spell for a damage spell, that's okay too. Stone Skin is at least a thematically earth-like spell, so we'll still pick it up regardless of whether or not we're actually going to use it. At level 14, we are a Sorcerer 8, and here we're going to gain another ASI/Feat. At this point, I'm more focused on ASIs than feats for our Cragheart. We've got plenty of strength, but we don't necessarily have the HP to keep us as tanky as a frontline fighter as we would like to. And we also don't have the greatest charisma to make it worthwhile to dedicate more towards ranged fighting. So now it's time to up one of these two for us, and I'm going to increase Con by +2. Doing so is going to immediately give us an extra 14 hit points, which is pretty huge, given that for now we've been suffering a little bit from the D6 hit die that we've been getting every sorcerer level. Feel free to switch this ASI for Charisma if you want. They're pretty interchangeable at this point, since our ASIs are getting so close together, and we're going to get another ASI in 2 levels anyway. But again, since I'm focusing melee, we're up in Constitution here. At level 15, we're back to Fighter for Fighter 7. The main thing we get from this is our next Battle Master ability, in addition to an extra Superiority die and 2 more maneuvers. The maneuvers, like I said, can be picked from whichever you like, and the Battle Master ability is Know Your Enemy. This allows us to learn 2 pieces of information from a specific list that relate to a creature's stat block. We have to interact with the creature for at least a minute, so this is more of a social ability than a combat one. And now this level isn't too helpful in terms of our Gloomhaven theme, but it does set us up for our next level, which is nice. So we'll just take the abilities we get anyways and not really complain too much. At level 16, we are a Fighter 8 and we get our next ASI/feat. This time we're going to want to choose whichever stat we didn't choose at level 14. So for our build, that means I'm upping our Charisma to 18. It isn't capped, but it's still enough to make our spell attack/save DC relatively worthwhile. For level 17, we're going back to Sorcerer to finish off the build. We are a Sorcerer 9, and Sorcerer 9 gets us access to 5th level spells. The main 5th level spell we want would have to be Wall of Stone. Remember when I was saying that there's not many spells that can create obstacles? Well, this is one of the few that can, and it really can. We'll pick it up and use it whenever we need to really lock down a part of the battlefield for our party, whether that's separate us from enemies, like entirely, or take a few enemies and just lock them out from their allies so the rest of our party and ourselves can just finish those guys off really quick. Level 18 is Sorcerer 10, and Sorcerer 10 is going to get us our next meta magic feature. Also, just to check in, we now have 10 sorcery points to spend on meta magic, and obviously we have plenty of spell slots to use if we want even more meta magic. So for the actual new meta magic feature, we can go ahead and pick whatever feels right to us. I would personally go back and either take Distant Spell or Extended Spell, depending on which we didn't choose earlier on. However, I will admit that Transmute Spell is a good way to take our off-earth damage types of Cold and Fire from Armor of Agathes and Mel's Minute Meteors and turn those spells into Acid or Poison damage, which gives off a bit more of an Earth-like theme. Pick whichever one of these you would like more. They're honestly all going to be pretty useful at some point. Level 19 is Sorcerer 11, and Sorcerer 11 really only gives us access to 6th level spells. Now these are going to be our most powerful spells, and we're only gaining 2 of them max, but they should hopefully be worth it. The main spell we want is Flesh to Stone. This is a spell that we want to use in order to petrify an enemy. Petrify, coincidentally, is also a Cragheart card, and not only that, but it's the Cragheart's Execute card. Execute cards are pretty powerful effects in Gloomhaven where you can just kill enemies. That doesn't really happen in D&D, but Flesh to Stone, the spell, which does petrify an enemy, actually kind of acts like that. Flesh to Stone is the main reason we wanted to go this far into Sorcerer. Obviously, it is nice to get spells that make us feel like we are a Master of Earth, but Flesh to Stone is a powerful spell that really makes us feel like the Cragheart specifically. Finally, at level 20, we are a Sorcerer 12, and we gain our last ASI/feat. At this point, our ability scores are already at a relatively good spot. We could cap one of our Strength, Constitution, or Charisma, or a feat like Tough would also be a very good option. However, there's one key ingredient for the Cragheart that we haven't quite gotten yet, and that is healing. As a Sorcerer Fighter, we really don't have anything that helps us heal others. Battle Master does have access to Rally, which kind of acts like a heal, but it isn't perfect. It gives temporary health, which I've also usually counted as the shield effect from Gloomhaven in the past. So with that in mind, we're going to want to take a feat that can give us access to some actual healing, and that is Divinely Favored. Divinely Favored gives us access to a Cleric cantrip. We take Spare the Dying here for the healing aspect. And we also get a 1st level spell that we can cast once for free per day, and we can cast it again with any spell slots that we have. Assuming we are good or neutral, if we're evil we won't get healing, but that's a minor point, then we can gain access to either Healing Word or Cure Wounds. Healing Word is the more efficient of the 2 healing spells, but as long as we have one of these, then that's fine. The one main drawback from Divinely Favored is that technically it's a Dragonlance campaign specific feat. So ask your DM if it is alright to take, though at level 20 I'd be surprised if they refuse, since this really is not the best way to spend a final ASI/feat, but for us we want it because it's going to thematically round off our build. Our one main regret is that we didn't get it sooner. If it isn't actually okay to take, then no worries, just take Tough or something else that's more powerful and more useful, and make your DM pay for what they've done. Alright, so to summarize, we can certainly control the earth. Our stone sorcery abilities, plus the spells we chose, have given us a lot of earth-themed powers and a large number of AoE effects. We are also able to create some difficult terrain, plus some obstacles with the Wall of Stone. We can mix it up both at range or in melee, which is great, and if we do choose to go melee, we have a lot of options for adding push. It's just whether or not they stack together that's the question. We also have a little bit of healing, which is nice. We really could have gotten it a lot earlier, but that would just mean that our scaling would have been a little worse off, so it's probably best that we waited, and really it's not the end of the world that we didn't have it earlier either. We're also pretty sturdy for a sorcerer class. Looking at our hit point pool, we have 14 hit points at level 1. Not actually, but our constitution improvements are retroactive, so it's kind of like we do. And with 7 additional levels of fighter, that's an extra 6 plus 4 times 10 equals 70 hit points. And then 12 levels of sorcerer, with stone sorcerer specifically, is 4 plus 5 times 12 is 108. This gives us a grand total of 192 hit points on average, since I used the average to calculate it. If we had taken Tough, we could have had an extra 40 hit points onto that, which really gives us a robust health pool. We also have a strong AC, with a natural AC of 17, plus a shield bumps us up to at least 19. We also could always pick up the spell Shield if we really wanted to add more AC to ourselves, and it could be flavored to be an Earth-like spell, but I just didn't pick it for this build because I was more focused on other, more thematic options, though it could be thematic and it's mechanically powerful, so I wouldn't blame you if you did take that. Overall, we're a very tough caster. Even though we don't have the most optimal spells, we can still contribute pretty well to battlefield control, and Action Surge can make us pretty deadly in some cases as well. My main regrets are that the Stone Sorcerer just felt so imperative to the Cragheart build that there weren't many other options to look at and get around the Unearthed Arcana aspect to it, though hopefully, by looking at these various levels and what we really did with some of them, maybe you've thought of some options that you could use to get around those types of restrictions. Perhaps Warlock really was the right answer by being able to upgrade our Eldritch Blast as well as have access to the Dow Genie. Perhaps just a more fighter or martial type class if we really wanted to go melee. The reason Sorcerer worked so well is because by making this odd Gish multi-class between Sorcerer and Fighter, it really allowed us to play up the fact that the Cragheart could go both melee or range. I am also a little sad that we didn't get our healing earlier, but like I said, we weren't really building for that. We were building for melee, so I wasn't too worried about it. The final thing I'm disappointed at is actually how few spells we got so quickly. There are a lot of spells that work really well, and Color Spray, though I don't think I ever actually mentioned us officially picking it up, I had it as an option, that would actually be a really cool and interesting spell to take. I don't usually take it often personally, but here it would be pretty perfect since it would act as Dirt Tornado for our cards, and it just gives a basic muddle effect. It blinds enemies, we could flavor it as sand, and that muddle effect would be something really nice because the Cragheart really does make a good use of muddle in their kit. If you were going a more range build, I definitely recommend it, though it's fine to cut from our more melee focused build, which we've already sort of done. Let me know what you thought of the build or what you would change to get closer to the theme of the Gloomhaven character class. That wraps up our starting 6 Gloomhaven character classes, so next ones are going to be spoiler tagged as they are starting our locked classes from the Gloomhaven base game. I'm happy to have had you on the journey though this far, and I hope to see you in the next one.